Hello everybody. Today we are going over properties of logarithms. In this class there was no packet. It was just notes on your own paper. The title is Properties of Logarithms, and this is just going over what we had already talked about in the previous class with our Desmos activity, going over properties of logarithms. So definitely go check that activity out in Canvas. To help solidify some of these concepts and see the patterns where they are coming from. So we're going to start out by looking at the product, the quotient, and the power properties. So you are definitely going to want to write these down so that you have them to reference. Now, in class, we did whiteboard practice. So we had baby whiteboard and expo marker, looked at it one at a time. Right now I'm just going to go through all of the examples so that you can see what we did in class. So starting out with our first problem, we see that we have a plus sign in between these two logs. So if we are going to combine them, we are going to use product property. Now, that would just mean that I am taking the arguments of each individual log and multiplying them together. So I'm taking the 4 and the 9 and multiplying them together in the new argument of my combined log. Remember, argument is just the word we use for the stuff that's at the end of the log inside the parentheses of the log. If I use my calculator, I get that 4 times 9 is 36. Now, I'm not done yet because what a logarithm asks me to do is it asks me to find the exponent on this base that gives me my argument, the number right here. So if I hop over to Desmos and I check what power on 6 gives me 36. It's not 1, and I'll zoom in more so we can see that better. It's not 1, and it ends up being 2. So my answer is 2. So going back, the answer to this one is 2. Now for the next problem, I do something similar. I am looking at product property again because I see plus, and then I have 3 times 27. Now, I don't know what 3 times 27 is off the top of my head, so I'm going to be using Desmos to help me out. 3 times 27 is 81, so log base 3 of 81. And so here I'm checking what power goes on 3 to give me 81. So not 1, not 2, not 3, a power of 4. So therefore my answer is 4. Cool. Forgive me because I'm very congested right now. My next one, I see that it looks a little different because there is a minus. So it is going to be the quotient property. I'm going to divide the arguments instead. Why is it glitching now? Now, 100 divided by 4, again, you can use a calculator to check this out. I do know what this is. That is 25. And so, again, you can use Desmos to help you out. What power on 5 gives you 25? Well, I happen to know 5 squared is 25, so my answer is 2. Then here, again, we have quotient property. So I've got log base 7 of 7 over 49. Whoa, that was hideous. Okay, and then I am going to go to Desmos just so we can see how we're using it to do fractions. So I've got 7 divided by 49. And I hit the fraction button when I see it pop up, and that gives me 1 over 7. So now I'm checking what power on 7 gives me 1 over 7. Now, when I have bigger and bigger exponents, I see that it gives me bigger and bigger answers. If I'm wanting a fraction, if I'm wanting to get an answer smaller than 1 here, my exponent is going to have to be smaller than 0. Now, if I take a look at the number line, numbers that are smaller than 0 are negative. So I'm going to do negative numbers. Jeez. -1. Okay, let's see. And that gives me my answer. So remember, this simplified to, and that would just be -1, because 7 to the -1 gives me 1 over 7. Now, moving on to the next slide, I see something that looks a little different. I don't see a plus, I don't see a minus, I don't see 2 logs, but I do see a log with something extra on the outside of it. When I am simplifying my logs, I really want to make sure there's just 1 log and there's nothing extra outside of it. So this 2 is a problem. And if I check my properties, I see the one that has something in front of the log is my power property. So what am I going to do with this 2? Well, I'm going to make it the power on the argument, on the number inside of the log. So when I rewrite this, I'm going to have log base 5 of 25 squared. Now, 25 squared, big number. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to see what 25 squared is. It is 625. So really, this is log base 5 of 625. So I'm trying to see what power 5 has to have to give me 625. So not 1, 2, not 3, but 4. So my answer to this problem is simply 4, because that is the exponent. Right? The next one is very similar. I'm not going to do this one because it is so similar. But next, I see one that has more than one thing going on. I see a number in front of a log. I see a subtraction. So this is 2 properties at the same time. Now, when I'm trying to make it simple, when I'm trying to go from 2 logs to 1 log, but I have more than one property at the same time, there is a certain order that we have to go in. So when we're combining, first, we are going to use power property. Oh, why don't we do that? Property. Then we will use product or quotient property, whichever one pops up first. So first I see that I have a 2 outside of this log. So I'm going to use power property. I'm going to rewrite this as log base 2 of 32 squared. Why did I do that? Minus log base 2 of 8. Then I see this subtraction. So I'm going to use the quotient property. So 32 squared divided by 8. Now, I don't know what 32 squared divided by 8 is. So I'm going to use my calculator, and I'm going to see what 32 squared divided by 8 is. And that is 128. And then to finish out the problem, I am simply checking what power goes on 2 to give me 128. Now, I might jump around a little bit because 2 to the 1 is 2, which is way smaller than 128. So, okay, that's 16, it's 32, 64, and 128. So the power on 2 that gives me 128 is 7. And so we're done. Now here we see a completely different type of problem. We have variables now. So really it's not that completely different from what we've been looking at, because hopefully you notice that there's not much different aside from the variables. We still have numbers in front of the logs, so we will still use power property first. So, 6 1 plus log base 2 y to the 5th. Then I see that it is that these two logs are adding, so I will use product property. And then that's it. I don't know what x is. I don't know what y is. This is the most I can do. And then that's it. Okay. Next, we're going to look at this one down here. When we look at this one, notice that, yes, there's parentheses, so that throws us off. There's a lot going on. But one of the biggest things we should notice is that here, the bases are different. Now, when the bases are different, we cannot do anything. And so this one was really a trick question. Our problem ends there. So make sure you make a note of that, just so you don't get tricked. Finally, we see this one that has a lot going on. In fact, I see all three properties happening at the same time. But I do not need to freak out because the same rules apply. First, we are going to look for where power property happens, and we are going to apply that first. So this is going to stay the same. This is going to turn into log base 8 of x to the 6. It's log base 8y. And then I see I have the product property. So now I'm just going to go one at a time. I'm going to do product property first because that's what comes first and what I'm seeing here. So it's going to be 3 times x to the 6 and then at the very end I see I still have this minus here, so I'm going to use quotient property at the very end. And then that's it. So we have one last slide, and this is going to be talking about going backwards from what we did. We are going to expand. So meaning now they're giving us 1 log, and now we want to unsimplify things. We want to take it from 1 to 2. So I am going to look at what's happening inside of the parentheses. What operation do we see there? Well, with the 2 and the x next to each other like that, they are multiplying. So we are going to use product property here because we see multiplying. What this means is instead of 1 log, I'm going to have 2 logs, and they're going to be adding with each other. And inside, I'm going to see each thing that was multiplied. So the 2 was multiplying with the x. So when I separate them, I'm separating the 2 and the x. So here I have my final answer. Right, with this next problem, I see a little more going on here. I see a power, but most importantly, I see multiplying. So I am going to start, it's backwards. I'm going to start with product and quotient property first, and then power at the end. So first, since I see product property, I'm going to start out by separating into 2 logs, the x to the third and the y, since they're what we're multiplying together. And then at the very end, I'm going to move this power to the front of this log. And now that is the end of this problem. Which one? Ooh. So at the very end, I think we'll do this one last to see what happens when we have a lot going on. So I see that I have 5 times x divided by z to the 4th times y. Now, one thing that's important to note is even though it is typed like this, really, if I could have, I would have put it like this. This is important because the z to the 4th and the y are in the bottom. They're both being divided. So, or they're both dividing. So what that means is both of them are going to be part of the quotient property because they are dividing. They're the stuff on the bottom. So what this is going to look like is we're going to have log, I hope I have space, log base 2 of 5. And since that's adding with the x, log base 2 of x minus log base 2 of z to the 4th minus log base 2 of y. And then at the very end, of course, I see that we have a power up here, so that's going to go to the front of that log. So at the very end, log base 2 of 5 plus log base 2 of x minus 4 log base 2 of z minus log base 2 of y. And this is the very, 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 very end of it. All right, and that is all we had in our Properties of Logarithms practice day.